Hey, g'day. Welcome to the ATP Project. You with your hosts and no guests and then a couple of other weirdos sitting in the room.
That's it.
And today we're talking about iron.
Iron.
It depends how we want to talk it. We're talking about the iron, I-R-O-N, as opposed to ion.
Because we pronounce the R.
Yes, sometimes in different places and things. Well, this is where it gets a bit confusing. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this, a couple of reasons why I really want to do this podcast topic. One, Elizma says iron, and I think that's so cool because the only other person I've ever heard say that is Drago from Rocky IV.
Oh.
He's not human. He's like iron.
Anyway, 84, great.
And then genuinely, there's a couple of cases that I have in the back of my mind of people that have struggled with iron deficiencies and iron excess, and nothing seems to have worked. There's a lot of people out there that have got other little conditions that are missing diagnosis. They can't quite work out what their problem is, if it's a thyroid disorder or a metabolic syndrome, or do I have to do a liver detox and that sort of stuff. And I want to explain how iron links into all of those things, because most people think iron is just blood. That we've got to eat an animal that contains blood to get the iron, and then it's going to make blood in our body, and then a lot of people think that's what iron is, and that's all the story to iron. But there is so many links, and even in the preparation for this podcast, man, I learned so much really cool stuff about the symptom pictures associated with these things, and trying to work out whether you do have a metabolic disorder or a thyroid disorder, or if it is simply iron. And the fact that when we measure iron, we're measuring our blood. Okay, so most of the time you get a blood test for iron, and iron is one of the most crucial ingredients for blood. And so therefore, if we don't have blood, we die. So the last place that typically runs, if you're getting low iron in your blood, then you pretty much can guarantee you've got no iron anywhere else doing bugger all, because it's all your resources will be shunted back into making blood to maintain survival. So by the time you're at that point, you've probably got a variety of iron deficient symptoms all over your body that you may not be aware of. So we'll talk a lot about iron today. That will link in with other trace minerals and other weird stuff. We'll mention viruses without mentioning any particular viruses. We'll mention how this works and how the liver's involved and the thyroid, and then I think it's a really fascinating topic. So let's get started.
Iron's so cool because, yes, we need iron to survive, but the Earth needs iron to survive, because iron is the most abundant element in the Earth. Without it being molten in our core, we won't have our magnetic field, we won't protect us from the solar wind, we won't have an atmosphere, there'll be no life on Earth.
Wow. So iron's relatively important.
That's ironic.
So what we're talking about is the Earth. So I tell you what's fascinating, that I find fascinating, and you better as well, or otherwise we'll just edit this bit out. But there are so many weird-ass similarities between the Earth and the human body, like how we got a similar water percentage. There's also, we have all the main river systems that look like main arteries, and then all the capillaries running off it. There's all the same minerals, of course, same microbes, same everything. It's almost like it's the same stuff that makes up our cells, makes up this big, cool thing. And then to think that it's also got these big charge and aura and everything around it, like the body. I find that absolutely fascinating. Anytime I see kind of patterns where things go tiny, 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 but then also go massive, massive, massive. I don't know, there's a word for that. There was actually a form of religion actually that talked a lot about that, or a belief system that basically everything that we see here keeps going more and more microscopic, exactly the same, and then ultimately we possibly just the cell of a larger organism. There's this weird school of thought, but I find that sort of stuff really fascinating. So the Earth itself requires iron to function, and there's obviously a lot of iron, abundant amount of iron in our environment for a reason.
Yeah, there is. I mean, 90% of the Earth's iron, and they know this because a Kiwi back in 1930, I wish Jeff was here.
Why are you so surprised?
Yeah, well, because they discovered that there was iron used because there's so much volcanic activity, you could use the sonic waves of the earthquake to determine what the Earth's made of. And that's one of the evident points of evidence. The other one is using a compass.
Yeah, right.
Because molten iron makes a magnetic field, and that's how there's north, and that's those poles, and giving out from the North Pole, for example, you can point to the North Pole, and that's what is the molten iron.
And that's all based on the fact that we've got the big ball of molten iron inside the Earth.
Yeah, because every sun, like star, if you want to call it that, the heaviest element it can make is iron.
Is that why it's in the middle? It's all compressed or something?
Yeah, it's all compressed, and then it goes supernova, and you can make larger, heavier elements. But iron is very, very abundant in dead stars or old stars. And in fact, our sun, for example, is a second generation star. It's already exploded.
Yeah.
It's already gone supernova and created the Earth and other things. Explosion, it created an accretion disk.
Yeah.
And then as the sun reformed again and got to enough pressure and reignited again, that's our current star. Of course, the accretion disk formed into the Earth, and that's how the Earth was formed 4.54 billion years ago.
Oh, that's wild, eh?
Yeah.
And if you're religious, you may be thinking, and well, we can confirm that was God.
Sure,
So
why
this
not?
works out quite well.
It does. The other thing is, of course, the early life on Earth, if I take back 3.8 billion years, the eukaryotes required iron
So
to
they're
make...
just single-cell organisms?
single-cell organisms. Yeah. You see them in the shallows of like Shark Bay in Western Australia. They're still there. Those things make oxygen. So that's how oxygen became in the atmosphere.
Wild, man.
Because before that, it was a lot of CO2 because we had much more CO2 in our early life.
Yeah.
And of course, they
So
converted.
everything grew and thrived.
Yeah. And of course, the prokaryotes use the iron to give off oxygen as a byproduct. And that's what plants do these days.
And also bugs and viruses. And it's interesting because it's a very important process with viral replication and other sort of infections as well. And they're single-cell organisms.
Of course they are.
Typically. Yeah, wow. Cool, man.
Yeah, it's all related.
In our body, let's just quickly refer to blood, our red blood cells. And why are they red? So
Do you want me to explain why?
Yeah, go
Sure,
on.
it's to do with the chemical bonding of iron.
Yep.
Iron is a transition metal, and transition metals in the periodic table are typically colourful.
Yeah.
Like copper and all these other ones, strontium, those sort of ones. Gold is gold, for example. And those ones, when they form different, what they call valencies, Fe3 plus, Fe2 plus, change their colours a bit.
Yeah.
Now, for example, if I can take you back, we were talking about Mars before, probably off camera.
Yeah.
And don't laugh, Brooklyn. We talked about Mars. Now, Mars, what's its colloquial
That was Brooke
name?
laughing,
It's called the red planet, right?
That's right.
Why is it red? Because it's full of iron oxide.
Oh, wow.
And that's because the iron Fe2 plus, the heme iron that we're going to talk about with the red blood cells, just to give you a link, is that red colour.
Yeah, wow.
That's the oxidation reaction, right,
Yep.
Steve? So that's why with rust, when iron rusts, it goes into that kind of reddish
Goes into
kind
a
of
browner colour when you go to the Fe3 plus, which is the non-heme iron, and that's very oxidised. Because oxidation is loss of electrons. You lose an electron. So it goes from Fe2 plus to Fe3 plus.
Yeah.
Starts off as Fe, just normal iron.
Yeah.
And then it goes 2 plus, 3 plus. 3 plus is that dark, reddy, very earthy colour.
Yeah,
the 2
right.
plus is red. And that's why
Hang on. There's a lot of people out there that might be hearing about 2 pluses and
3
hemes
pluses
and Mars and Brooko's dating life and all this sort of stuff thrown into one thing. Let's take a step back. So when we talk about our red blood cells, which is the blood cells that deliver oxygen throughout our body, they're made up of a lot of things. But iron, folate, B12 makes the hemoglobin component. And then that hemoglobin's what carries oxygen around. So what were you saying? So what iron is in our blood? What is it? So when we eat food, oh man, this is so complicated because there's so many issues now to discuss because we use iron in different 3 pluses, 1 plus, 2 plus. Let's talk about that. Let's go back and say, what the bloody hell is iron?
Okay. There's 3 types of iron. There's iron metal, which is no pluses or minuses. It's metal. And there's a 2 plus, which we call the heme iron for human. And there's a 3 plus, which is like the rust. We humans like the 2 plus. We can't absorb the 3 plus.
Hang on. When you say that, are you talking as a meat eater?
No. If you don't eat meat, you have to convert the 3 plus to a 2 plus. And a lot of people, have you heard of vitamin C being taken with...
I have.
Right. Well, vitamin C donates an electron to the Fe3 plus to make it Fe2 plus.
So...
And then it can be absorbed. You can't absorb Fe3 plus.
So what's heme iron?
It's 2 plus.
Heme iron's the 2 plus. So when we eat animal products, it's got the heme iron because they've got it in there from the blood.
Yeah, sure.
So that's why we eat it and we get it that way.
Absorbed very
easily. If
easily.
it's from a plant, then it's typically the 3 plus.
Yeah, and you need cytochrome duodenal B, which is like an enzyme system that takes it from the 3 plus to 2 plus.
And
to
does
absorb
that
it.
involve ascorbic acid?
You can use ascorbic acid itself can do that because
Yep.
it can donate an electron,
Yep.
which is what an antioxidant does.
Yep.
It can donate an electron or a hydrogen, in this case an electron,
Yeah.
to turn 3+ into 2+, because an electron is a negative.
Yep.
So you add a negative to a 3+, you get a 2+.
So while we're talking about that, sorry, I'll get to you in a second,
Yeah,
Elizma, but
I wanna
I'm
listen to
trying to
you.
just
No, I'm
clarify
listening.
this because I know there's a lot of people
Yeah.
out there that might be confused by this part. So ascorbic acid
Yes.
does it because it's a reducing agent that donates a electron
Yeah.
to change it. Does it do it because it's acid? What's
No.
the link between iron and acid for absorption in regards to stomach acid?
Yeah, it's not that it's donating an electron.
Yeah.
Stomach acid is a hydrogen, H+,
Yep. Yep.
and that is also an antioxidant, but
Yep.
it's a different. You need the electron
Yep.
to convert it from Fe3+ to Fe2+. You can't donate a proton to...
So for our requirement for good levels of stomach acid to actually absorb iron, what's the link there? Is it to do with the conversion of Fe3 to 2, or is it purely to do with the breakdown of the protein and the liberation of the iron that was
Yeah.
found within the
It
protein structure?
denatures the protein, so it
Yep.
can be absorbed in the duodenum, the small intestine.
So if we have, for the vitamin C with iron is important if it's the Fe3
Yes.
form and typically plant-based
Plant-based,
iron
yeah.
sources.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
really need a lot of ascorbic acid, which is kind of cool because it's in plants.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a nice little synergy there that the vitamin C from the plants will probably help with that absorption of the iron from the plants. And then when it comes to meat and protein structures holding lots of iron within that matrix, we want lots of stomach acid to actually denature, break down the protein to liberate the iron.
Yep.
Two totally different types of acids for totally different functions. Vitamin C is important for the plant absorption, and hydrochloric acid is important for the breakdown of meat.
Yes.
Now, with the meat heme iron, do we need vitamin C at all?
No.
Because it's already in that 2 form.
It's already in 2 form. This is where I see supplements with, and I know why they put it in there, because it's a
People
cool
want it.
thing to do. Yeah. And also, look, if you have too much iron, it can be a pro-oxidant.
Yeah.
So I haven't got to the too much iron stage, which we'll talk
Oh, we'll
about
get
that
there.
later. But you don't need it to absorb heme iron. It's transported straight across.
Yeah, righto. As long as you can liberate it from the meat,
Yep.
which is where we need the stomach acid to be able to do that.
Yep. And you don't absorb too much iron. You only absorb about 10% of what you eat.
10
even
to
supplement.
30%,
Yeah.
depending
Yeah, right.
on.
It depends on your...
Unless you're anemic and then your body would increase.
A little bit,
Or
yeah.
a little bit,
It
not too
depends on
much.
it depends on your level of hepcidin, which is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
chemical from the liver
Yeah.
that regulates iron absorption. And if you're
Okay.
anemic, you don't secrete much of that to absorb more iron.
Yeah,
But if
okay.
you take an iron supplement, hepcidin levels rise,
Yep.
and you'll absorb less. And we'll get to hemochromatosis later, but they don't have that.
Yeah,
So they just
right.
absorb everything.
Yeah, right.
And that's shit.
Yeah,
We'll get
because
to
then
how
they
bad
rust, wouldn't they?
They rust. Their liver rusts
Because
and their
the
spleen
iron
rusts.
oxide, the extra iron,
Yeah.
that doesn't incorporate into the blood because it needs extra folate, B12, and there's only so much blood cells you need.
Yeah, and
The rest of
also
that iron gets stored in the liver?
Yeah, and also just so many proteins that can bind to it. So it's free iron that will tend to, if iron is bound to something like
Yeah.
ferritin,
Yeah.
it's harmless.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
But it's when it's free.
Yeah.
So in the case of absorbing too much iron, that it has a high chance of oxidizing and forming free radicals and damaging DNA.
Can
all
you
kinds of stuff.
explain that to me with the blood testing? You know, where they talk about the free iron, the ferritin,
Yeah.
the transferrin saturation. Can you explain what those things mean?
Right. So generally, when you do like an iron study
Yeah.
panel or iron panel, they'll measure free iron.
Yep.
So they'll just be iron. It'll be hemoglobin. So hemoglobin would be iron that is. Bound within the hemoglobin molecule
Yep.
and carrying, that's your oxygen carrying capacity. There's the transferrin and transferrin saturation rate. So they are the transporters that kind of like move iron or mobilize iron from the liver.
Yep.
And then you have ferritin, which is more like a storage protein. So generally when they check for anemia, they will go on the ferritin levels.
Yeah.
So in mild anemia, you'll see like iron levels kind of being a little bit low.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have more your moderate type of anemia, which is also sometimes called erythropoietic anemia,
Yep.
which is where you'll tend to see, you'll see the iron levels a little bit lower, but you'll also see the transferrin saturation rate lower. So now there's less iron being transported. And then when you get into your more, anemia, that's when you'll start seeing all of those. So hemoglobin will be low, iron stores will be low, ferritin will be low, transferrin, saturation, everything.
So nothing
will
in
kind of be low.
transit, nothing in storage,
Yeah.
nothing in the process of being made, and nothing that was made.
Yeah.
And by that time, you're feeling pretty crappy, I can imagine.
Absolutely, because even with mild anemia, they kind of classify mild anemia as where ferritin levels are 30 or under, and then full-on anemia is 10 and under. And I mean, when your ferritin levels is that low, you will feel pretty crappy.
Yeah. And so what happens? So if we consider that this element of iron in our red blood cells' job is to deliver oxygen through the body. Right? So oxygen there obviously needed to make energy, all right? But blood is really important to keep us alive. So when you get tissues in your body saying, I'm not getting that oxygen, there's a signal that goes back as part of the stress nervous system. So, well, there's a potential we're dying, there's potential we're bleeding to death, and we might have had our leg ripped off or something like that. So all sorts of weird symptoms will then happen from that. It can manifest in a lot of people as panic and anxiety. And what can make that worse, and especially insomnia? So they're fatigued but restless.
Yeah.
It's like there's this genuine cellular fatigue that you go and do something and you feel like you've run a marathon. When I say do something, some of those things might be sleep, because you just lie still or sit still for a period of time. You get less pressure in your oxygen, you get less muscle contractions, you're getting less oxygenation at rest. So you actually, when you start to move, you hurt more, and you get a lot of aches and pains, and you can't, and you build up the same amount of metabolic waste sleeping as someone else would running an actual marathon. So you wake up feeling like that. Now, what I'm talking about here is in our mitochondria, and if we're not producing good energy from oxygen, we create inefficient. It's like incomplete combustion. For anyone out there that's a mechanic, you get not enough oxygen in, you get shit in the carby or something, you get not enough oxygen in, you create a lot of waste. It's inefficient combustion. That waste is typically acidic water that sits in around the cells, but it settles when we settle. So when you're kind of busy and pushing yourself, you're okay. It's the moment you stop and then try to start again that you get the aching. Plus, the moment you stop, without the muscle contractions, the body can't get the oxygen in. So it's restless. So you get all these like muscle contractions and everything, and to try to suck that oxygen through or drag it through, because remember, as part of the survival response, your body might think you're bleeding to death and contribute to vasoconstriction because you don't have enough blood to be everywhere. So all of a sudden you get less circulation, and in that circulation you're getting less oxygen, and the only way to overcome that is to actually force the blood into those areas through movement. So restless leg syndrome, insomnia, having to keep moving and all that sort of stuff, really important signs and symptoms, not just the fatigue associated with anemia. Of course, a combination of low blood volume, because you don't have enough blood, and low blood circulation will manifest as, you can have a look at your gums and they look pale, look under the eyes, they look pale. The fingers will be pale, but if you push the fingers, the fingernails, all the blood goes and it just doesn't want to come back because there's not enough blood because of the vasoconstriction and poor capillary return. So you'll get a lot of those sort of symptoms. So it's not just pale fatigue.
No.
A lot of it is, in some people, they may manifest more with anxiety and panic. Now, if you build up enough acidic waste, the way the body eliminates it is through shallow breathing, panting, and that often will come with other muscle contractions and can manifest as a lot of symptoms of panic. So a lot of people that are anemic have this, they basically can be running on nervous energy. They'll feel flighty, there's a lot of spasming, there's a lot of twitching, there's a lot of cramping, there's this inability to switch off. They run on this nervous energy, extreme fatigue, usually get a lot of respiratory acidosis, which manifests as sighing or an inability to take in a deep breath. So you find these people are always sighing, or they're doing these catch-up breaths. So they're shallow breathing and then they start again, okay? So they're the sort of symptoms of someone that might have not enough iron in their blood. But that is just relating often to the blood. There's so many other really cool things that might be showing up well before that. And I'm fascinated by iron's role in the liver in particular, because if you realise what you're talking about with the hepcidin, I think it's that stuff released from the liver that regulates iron absorption. So that's a lot to do with the liver. Remember when you see, one of the things when people got too much iron in their blood, we go and look for a virus or something to see if they got any viral hepatitis or something. So, and that's all related to the liver as well. And I know the liver iron it's got something to do with bile and all that sort of thing as well. Did you want to, Elizma, explain a little bit about iron's role outside of the blood, but relating to what the liver does?
Well, within the liver, I mean, if we look at the role of, first of all, that's kind of like where iron metabolism and iron mobilization, I should rather say, takes place. It's in the liver. And that's very much regulated by molybdenum, copper, zinc, and all of that. So there's a very strong relationship between those four minerals. And with copper, for instance, if you actually need copper bound to ceruloplasmin. When it's bound to ceruloplasmin, it kind of like improves iron's mobilization through the transferrin proteins from the liver. Now, if copper is too high, then you're not going to absorb as much zinc and iron. But if copper is too low, you're going to have issues with the mobilization of iron. So it needs to be just right. So it's not that copper is bad. It needs to be kind of like within ratio. Now, with zinc, you need zinc to make the proteins. So ferritin and all of those proteins, you need zinc to make them. So if you don't have enough zinc, then that's also not going to happen. Vice versa also, if you have iron in excess, that can affect copper and zinc absorption. So everything is about kind of balance. Molybdenum in particular is involved in, through the, as part of the xanthine oxidase enzyme, it's involved in making ferritin or that transport mechanism, or I should say storage mechanism through ferritin. So this all kind of like happens in the liver. But where iron also becomes very important is iron itself is a very important cofactor for liver enzymes to work, the CYP450 enzymes.
Yeah, right.
So all the CYP450 enzymes need iron. So that's your first phase of liver detoxification, drug metabolism and things like that. So you can imagine if you have iron deficiencies, that's going to affect how you're going to metabolize certain medications and things like that. I think there was one phase 2, a conjugation enzyme. It's part of the glucuronidation enzymes, the UDPs, I believe. That's also dependent on iron. Glutathione, not so. So glutathione seems to work without independent of iron status. But certainly that glucuronidation pathway also needs iron. So they kind of like...
That's amazing. They're all like antioxidant pathways.
Yeah.
And like where the whole issue, like the depositing of the iron in the liver in cases of hemochromatosis, it becomes this massive oxidative stress.
Yes.
I mean, and whole iron's role is delivering oxygen everywhere. It's basically, I would have thought iron is our major oxidator in our body. Is that a thing? Oxidator?
Yeah.
That's going to be my new superhero name, by the way, Oxidator.
Reactivator.
Yeah.
No, reducer.
Yeah, so iron therefore can also be it can drive antioxidant pathways as well as be the main culprit behind oxidation.
Absolutely,
Oxygen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with ferritin, like that's a typical inflammatory marker. So if ferritin levels go up, then that means it's some kind of oxidative stress in the body or an infection. Because one of the main things, our body, when you do have an infection, your body will put iron in storage, because iron, if it's free, unbound, so with ferritin it's bound and it's fine. But free iron will tend to reactivate a lot of dormant bacteria and dormant viruses.
Yeah, right. And that's how colloidal silver works, by inhibiting iron availability for bugs. Yeah. And lactoferrin is another one that does that.
Yeah, lactoferrin is another one.
That's how lactoferrin actually works, and it binds to the iron, the free iron, frees it up. That free iron, There was
a great recent paper on that it's called, I'll just read the title, it'll gives it away. It says, depriving iron supply to the virus represents a promising adjunct therapy against viral survival.
Oh, there you go.
So this is one of the treatments, is they're giving, chelation therapy with ethylene diaminotetraacetic acid to get rid of the iron out of the body to particular viruses that shall remain nameless.
And that free iron as well is involved in the damage to the liver cells associated with viral hepatitis. Yes. They call it ferroptosis now. So they've decided that there's a form of apoptosis, which is a destruction or self-destruct mechanism in a cell that can be induced by iron release in the liver. And it's actually part of the mechanism of the virus to stimulate further inflammation and oxidative stress to help their replication and survival.
Ferroptosis, you did a great segue there. Yeah. Because you wanted to talk about endometriosis. Ferroptosis is a failure in endometriosis.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Total fluky segue. Segway.
God.
No, man, no idea.
Gets my
that was
little
like one
chart.
of them Segways where, the actual bike where you're on a
Yeah.
two-wheel bike and someone just pushed me and I went, whoa.
Because I know you wanted to talk about endometriosis. And so...
I did want to talk about endometriosis.
Okay, so...
I had no idea about the thing I said.
Ferroptosis.
Yeah, ferroptosis and
Well, how
endometriosis. Ironic is that? That's
Is that ironic?
isn't
Is
it?
that an example
That's
of irony?
That's ironic. It's beautiful.
That looks irony. Look how red it is.
Yeah, that's a uterus. Nice picture of a uterus there. And this is what we call retrograde bleeding, where most women get some bleeding out of the uterus. It goes down the cervix, of course, but most of the time it comes up past the ovaries and you bleed into into your peritoneal cavity.
Yeah,
women,
right.
and what happens there? You get ferroptosis.
Yeah, right.
And that kills gets rid of the red blood cells there, so you don't develop endometriosis. 10% of women don't have that pathway, so guess what they develop? Endometriosis.
Wow. And a
That's
lot of the
interesting.
pain associated with endometriosis, it's been described to me many different ways, but the biochemical reaction behind it can often involve the oxidation of iron in the peritoneal cavity that creates a lot of the pain.
Yep.
An inflammatory reaction. That's
Absolutely.
wild, huh?
Yeah, so there it is. So there's a graphic that I'll show the camera so we can see the retroneal
It's like an
bleeding.
alien, doesn't it?
Yeah, well,
You know, the only reason I'll tell you something. This is going to be an insight into me no one needs to know. But no, when I was studying, so I'm a very visual learner. I can remember things what they look like in an exam. So and I was very bad attention span, and so I used to sit in my lectures with my textbook and I would turn all of those diagrams into funny pictures.
Yeah.
So I'd be sitting there and I'd be just all over it, turn those into an alien. I used to always turn the uteruses into an alien, turn those, the ovaries into big eyeballs. It's a trap.
Kind of looks like it.
But then the funny thing is in my brain then, when I see those pictures, it just flips back to the alien. But then I can remember all sorts of details about that diagram related specifically to my bizarre drawing that I did on it. Crazy, huh?
That's crazy.
And symptom pictures. I used to draw the people and remember them.
Yeah, I did
by
that
drawing
as
the people.
well.
The snot and
Homeopathy, we did that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
pasted it. You should have seen my apartment. It was just pictures all over the walls of these little characters that I drew.
How offensive is it when you're talking to someone, you go, oh, fuck, that's you. And you got this you're drawing a picture of this
It's
fat,
pus.
crusty, putty person. And they're like, oh, that's my body type. I thought I was an endomorph.
Classic sulfur is dishevelled and
Yes.
looks like
Yes.
unkept.
That's right.
I remember all that. It's
right.
quite amazing. When you were talking, when you were talking about blood tests before, they've included CRP, which is C-reactive protein or an inflammatory marker, in iron studies now.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a protein
cool.
released from the liver.
Yeah.
And this is just a research. I didn't know that until I got the newsletter from Queensland Medical Laboratory,
No, that's cool.
where they talked about iron studies. And one of the readings in there is C-reactive protein when they do iron studies. And I went, really? And so I looked up and you write about the inflammation because inflammation dries up iron
You
studies.
stopped and went, really?
I went, really? And, Brooklyn behind me goes, what are you looking at on your computer?
Who said that?
Brooklyn, of course.
Oh,
Get in
weirdo.
trouble with her all the time.
Yeah, she's strange, though.
She is a bit. But it's quite amazing that inflammation, is now a normal part of iron studies.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
got nothing really to do with iron.
Because, in the past, I can't wait for them to update the thyroid studies then. Because,
Oh, yes.
man, this is the other thing I really wanted to make sure everyone's aware of. But typically, it's a lot of people that will be ticking every symptom of that hypothyroid chart. Then they go to the doctor to get the test and it comes back, they measure it, and they come back and say, no, look, I've had my thyroid tested and it's fine. And then you go, well, it's not because of look at this, So then you find out the testing and all they measured was TSH. Now, TSH is released from the pituitary gland to tell the thyroid to go faster. All right. So technically, when someone has a low TSH, the doctor interprets that as a fast thyroid.
Yeah.
So then they go, therefore, regardless of your symptom picture, you're an idiot. Your TSH is your brain telling your thyroid to go faster. It's not telling it to go faster, therefore it's fast enough, regardless of how you feel. And therefore you don't have a thyroid problem. Sometimes they go further, they measure the T4 as well. And so then if they go, well, if the pituitary gland's not yelling at the thyroid to go faster and the thyroid's only releasing this much T4, well, happy days, you're fine.
Yeah.
So what I want people to understand is a couple of causes of someone to have low thyroid and still have their brain not tell them to run faster through TSH. One of them is iron deficiency, and the other one that I know of is estrogen issues, so people with weird estrogen activity. Both of those things can influence TSH and trick the brain into not telling the thyroid to go faster. And and then the reverse T3 issues that's associated with estrogen as well. So how crazy is that? So for anyone out there that's got all the symptoms of a sluggish thyroid and they've measured their TSH and it's low, because iron deficiency manifests with low TSH and low T4 and low T3.
Yep.
What does it do to reverse T3?
Increases reverse T3.
It does increase reverse T3 to slow it all down.
Yep.
But interestingly, a lot of those conversions of the T, that is a liver again.
Yeah.
So the liver, it converts a lot of that sort of stuff. So a low iron, again, you can't. So the enzyme thyroid peroxidase, it's iron
TPO.
dependent, isn't
Yes,
it?
it is.
TPO is iron dependent.
And so is deiodinase, which is a hepatic conversion
And what are
of
the
T4
other
to T3.
essential components for deiodinase? And is the zinc and selenium.
Yep.
So the balance between these trace minerals. So we need iron, zinc, and selenium. Now, so therefore, should I just get it in a tablet? I'll get because we've mentioned for iron to work properly, we need copper, cadmium in control. Well, cadmium we haven't talked about much. I want to talk more about that because cadmium's linked in with all these trace elements as a baddie. But so zinc, selenium. What are the other ones you said? Molybdenum.
Oh, there's millions of the traces.
Yeah.
Molybdenum. Another way to
Rather
remember
sing a
things.
song. Vanadium's important too. It's really, really interesting because there's a great chart that shows exactly what Matt says. I'll hold it up. And here's the scary part, that 32% of people are iron deficient.
Wow.
You know, that's extraordinary, isn't it? And it's dropped from 40%. You know, so we're about a
Why
third
the hell?
of the population.
Why would we 30 to 40% of us be deficient? It's everywhere, isn't it?
Well, in third world countries, it's quite deficient there.
Yeah.
And you can have you can be on all sorts
They
of
need to go to the
medications.
centre of the earth. It's
For example, if you've got an ache and pain you talked about before and you take a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, that will reduce iron levels.
what's the most commonly prescribed drugs?
Aspirin?
Heartburn stuff.
PPIs, proton pump inhibitors.
Yep.
So
and
with the
that
proton
will-
pump, proton pump means that proton is the hydrogen, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
so they stop it. We talked about the hydrochloric acid and the importance of hydrogen in that. Those proton pump inhibitor drugs for heartburn and reflux.
Absolutely. Calcium as well. People who take large amounts of calcium. Calcium reduces iron absorption as well.
Zinc. So what do we do with zinc? Because we said if you've got a zinc deficiency, your iron can't function.
Well, yeah. And you also need zinc to make stomach acid.
Yeah.
Right?
So can you take zinc and iron at the same time? Or
That's about iron supplements are recommended an hour before eating or 2 hours after eating.
Yeah.
That's a standard thing. But you can take them together if you trick the body into how you absorb the iron. And we haven't got into supplementation yet, but when we do, we can talk about that.
So there's some studies that show that with a zinc deficiency, you can't absorb iron, but if you overdose on the zinc, does it compete and bind to the iron?
Yeah, it
Because
does.
zinc's a chelator, isn't it? So chelating it, it'll bind to other things.
It does. You know, zinc sulfate is given with people with meals if you've got hemochromatosis to knock out
to
iron.
reduce the absorption.
So that's a treatment for it.
Yeah.
But it really is a tricky one, getting enough iron and getting not too much iron. It is, because you've got to remember that the classic thing you get from the doctor is 100 milligrams of an iron supplement, or 300 up to, and that just causes massive gut issues and people don't take it.
Well, this is the big vicious cycle. So someone that is actually iron deficient, we mentioned before that triggers a survival response because the body thinks they're bleeding to death. Yeah. So part of the survival response is short-term survival.
Anaerobic
shut down
metabolism.
digestion.
Yeah.
Shut down digestion to make sure you got resources out to your muscles and brain to keep going. So it's really hard for people that are stuck in that stress survival nervous system to bloody have a decent digestive tract to absorb anyway, let alone be their stomach to know that there's a big chunk of meat or 100 milligrams of iron on its way, so that we need to quickly switch over our resources via the vagus nerve to generate stomach acid and focus on digestion and absorption. Eating on the run, not being able to sit still, which typically anemic people can't do. So
crazy.
Other ways that iron can also play a role in digestive function, right?
Look at that chart.
I
Show
know.
everyone.
Look at that
That is
chart.
wicked.
I need my glasses.
This is from Dr. Ben Lynch. He's one of his
Ben
pathway
Lynch is
planners.
brilliant stuff, eh?
He's got
I
great
love
stuff.
it.
And you can see that all the hydroxylase enzymes here in the middle require iron as a cofactor. And this is kind of what makes your dopamine, your norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin. Now we know that norepinephrine, epinephrine play a role in adrenal function. We know adrenal function plays a role with thyroid, right? There's a connection there. At the same time, we also know that serotonin kind of regulates gut motility, right?
Yeah.
So low serotonin usually translates to constipation issues and things like that. So apart from being very important in the brain, a lot of these neurotransmitters also play roles in other hormonal functions. And did you guys know that the dopaminergic area in the brain, that's where the largest amount of iron in the brain is stored. It's actually in the dopamine.
No, I did not know
center.
that. And is there any link in there to is that oxidization of that linked to Parkinson's at all?
That's what they reckon. And Alzheimer's.
Yeah, wow.
There's a great book out on the neurological effects of iron. I think I sent it to you guys a couple of days ago, but it goes into all the it's 300 something pages.
Yeah, I read
so
that.
Iron is just but it just infiltrates the brain in positive and negative ways. It's incredible. It's like
I tell you something with the iron overload. It's very common in certain cultures as well, especially Celtics and that sort of stuff. But and it's funny because where I come from in Queensland, we used to have the Queensland Country Women's Association. And we used to talk to, and they'd say, when they've got had too much meat and their iron is high, because it's very common as well in that either the Celtic and then again with the Mediterranean, the thalassaemic belt and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of those people had a high iron. There's a lot of Maltese cane farmers and everything up there, and they'd always be talking about the shit on the liver. They go, they get all bilious. So you get too much iron, you get bilious, you get shit on the liver, which makes you hot, bothered, cranky, frustrated, irritable, and angry. And what's really interesting is when you have a look at traditional medicine systems, every time there's that liver qi stagnation or that gallbladder flow, like Ayurvedic, they talk about that as pitta, congestion, which builds up heat, anger, frustration. The Chinese medicine will talk about liver qi stagnation or liver rising, and it's all the same symptom pictures. And it's so cool because it's just associated with oxidation in those parts from the excessive iron.
It's extraordinary iron. People think iron energy, they think anemia and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's also iron's required for oxidative phosphorylation,
Yes.
which is when you shuttle, keep it simple, you shuttle electrons along a membrane, which allows protons to come in to make ATP or energy. Okay, that's the real. I've just done a disservice to the biochemistry. Yeah, so it's quite a handy thing. And without iron, you can't do that. Yeah. So you can't make energy. Your thyroid's stuffed. You are anemic. You're feeling like shit. You go to the doctor and they measure your thyroid and say, no, your thyroid's fine. See you later.
Yeah.
And these poor, usually women, because women require 18 milligrams of iron, we only require 9.
How much? Say that again.
We require 9 milligrams of iron a day.
Yep.
Women require 18.
Yeah, wow.
Because they bleed.
Yeah.
And so they require vastly more iron.
Yep.
And they're the ones that suffer this huge fatigue and they just feel overwhelmed. And because of the neurological effects, they feel very stressed.
There's also a lot of links with estrogen and iron and the regulation of iron movements with body estrogen, which kind of makes sense considering a menstrual cycle.
Well, testosterone is required for hematopoiesis.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why if you overdose...
Which is the production of blood cells.
Correct. I should have said that.
Yeah. Your words sound cool. They make us all sound very smart.
No, it's bad for a podcast. Talking to you guys is fine, but if you make too much iron, you can get problems with that. So a lot of people on steroids get heart attacks and those sorts of things.
Oh, and too much iron sometimes it's manifested in almost exactly the same symptoms. So we just mentioned that those people are cranky, irritable, hot and bothered, as opposed to anxious, panicky, flighty. They're more likely to be angry, frustrated, irritable. So there's a slight variation there. But otherwise, oxidative stress in the liver manifests with a thing called the acute phase response, which makes our blood go gluggy and sticky. So oxidative stress creates an inability to deliver good oxygen into cells, which still manifests as fatigue. Iron excess will manifest as fatigue and that sort of stuff, as well as iron deficiency. They'll both manifest as different mental emotions. So sometimes the symptom picture alone, you're going through and we can go, okay, well, there's something weird going on with your iron. But we, at this point in time, to know whether you have too much or not enough, we still often will do some testing.
Absolutely, because I've seen, I've had a few male clients who have had very, very high ferritin levels. They're fatigued, So even though they've got all this iron, and because if you look at it under a microscope, you'll see them stacking, with all that inflammation in the red blood cells.
Is it called
rouleau? Rouleau or roulette, I don't know how
it
to
looks
pronounce
really cool, eh? Rulio, I call it. And I used to say it like that when I saw it. I'd go, Rulio! But good news is No. So what Elizma is describing, if you imagine our red blood cells, we all know that they're weird little disky looking shaped
like
things,
that.
but they've got
Like
a positive
donuts.
charge. So they've got a positive charge on the outside of all of them, which is called the zeta potential. So when they get near each other, they push each other away. So that way they can force each other down these capillaries without just clumping up. So when you get a survival response, whether inflammatory, immune, even just emotional stress or oxidative stress or any of these things that we're talking about now, it takes away those positive charges. So that way the red blood cells are much closer together, makes it easier for them to clot in case of injury. So if you've got acute phase response happening now, typically you bruise easy. Again, you get poor capillary return on the fingernails, but if you bump you get a bump, then you've got so many red blood cells all close together, they just kind of mash up and smash, and those people bruise very easy. But they also manifest as like they're not getting any oxygen, but they don't look pale. They typically look like flushed red, that sort of stuff. So we're probably describing a lot of people out there in this podcast today.
Probably too, yeah. I think one another important symptom that I think I also want to mention, because I've seen this as well quite a bit, is people think that they've got some kind of cardiovascular issue because they'll tend to get like the rapid heartbeat. So they think there's something wrong with their heart. But that's just really their heart kind of like trying to get pump oxygen through the blood because they don't have enough oxygen. And that kind of ties in with the anxiety and the panic and all of that. So I've had quite a few people where they think there's, that they have the heart checked out, nothing's going on.
So blood pressure is normal and pulse rate is kind of normal. It's not even surging. They just seem to have an increased awareness of their heartbeat. Yeah.
And ADD as well. You will not believe how many kids, when they blood levels come back, they've got low iron. So kids with ADD and things like that. And we know that iron is needed for dopamine production. I've had a lot of kids improve quite a lot with just correcting their iron in their blood.
Well, I'm going to talk to you in a second about how you correct it in the different groups. I want to talk a little bit about things to do and things to avoid. I just wanted to quickly mention another group of people that often may have borderline iron deficiency is those with metabolic syndrome. Because if you consider someone that's struggling with their metabolism, someone struggling to lose the weight and get the results from all their hard work, you can imagine if the thyroid's slightly slower, then straight up, you're not going to be burning fat to generate heat and fueling that exercise. But also there's these receptors, these PPAR receptors that are found through our digestive tract and liver, and that's supposed to be determining what we're eating in regards to carbohydrate, fat and protein, and then determining our macronutrient burn or our calorie burn based on our consumption of food. Those things are highly regulated by trace elements, and an iron deficiency can actually totally screw with the PPAR receptors that run through the liver. And all the different keto systems and the low carbs and most of the supplements that support the thermic effects of food and to enhance calorie burn, a lot of those things work on these specific PPAR receptors. But an imbalance between iron, zinc, cadmium, copper, those sort of things can totally screw with that and contribute to it could be metabolic syndrome, because that links in with the bile production and cholesterol and blood pressure issues as well as metabolism and links in with the thyroid. Or it could just be the fact that you're just not getting the results that you think. And if you're manifesting with these other symptoms such as poor sleep and the fatigue and that sort of stuff at the same time as you're struggling with that metabolism keeping up with your requirements, well, it may just be as simple as needing to top up your iron. So there's another group of people that don't wait until you're fully anemic and needing iron transfusions and stuff. So how do we top up our iron now? Then we got to break it down between the plant people and the meat eaters. So, and then kids and that sort of stuff as well, which depending on the day could be either one of those.
Well, a lot of kids don't like to eat meat, They just
one
like
day
to
they
eat
might love
bread.
it, the next day they don't touch it.
That's right.
You have their favourite food, then anyway, I've got issues, you can tell. You'll finally work out a food they bloody love, and then you think, I'm going to give it to them every day, and then the next day they don't like it.
Yeah. That's what kids do.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
how do you tie them down? What do you force feed them?
there's only so much you can try. No, it's really weird. I got these two kids. One, he believes that he's a plant. He will not. He doesn't eat meat. He doesn't like it. Hates it, except if it's chicken. Then all of a sudden everything's great. So if we say everything's chicken, he eats meat. It's weird, huh?
Yeah.
Then I got the other kid that's a full paleo, loves it all, does everything perfect. It's just strange, man. So, but you can't work that out. I can't work the bloody thing out. But so what do we do? So when we're looking at iron supplementation, we've got to look at dose. Okay, so let's go for form of iron and doses. What do we do? So we got I know what you're going to say. I don't know. I think I know what both of you are going to say.
What?
Heme forms of iron are the best.
Well, I don't think you find a non-heme in a supplement.
Huh?
Yeah,
I don't think you find a non-heme in a supplement.
Yeah, so all supplement forms of iron are...
Heme.
Yeah.
Well, apart
Was
from,
that-
I don't know, like you can get like those
Iron
herbal...
plant,
Herbal ones?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah,
herbal
you can too,
liquids.
yeah.
iron tonics.
Yeah.
Now, my curious concern regarding iron tonic... Now, I've had some reasonable success using some of those plant-based iron tonics with children. You know, just those liquid ones. I don't want to mention brand names and that sort of stuff, but I'm sure we know which
Yeah, we
ones.
know which ones.
Yeah, there's a heap of... There's a few of them. And they were okay, I think. But I don't think those kids were eating anything, you know. And if you're anemic, you do absorb some, you know. But the other thing we haven't mentioned as an inhibiting factor for iron absorption is phytates.
Yes.
And phytic acid. And this is... So we talked about iron being in plants and the synergy of the vitamin C that's also there, helping converting it from the Fe3 to the Fe2. But the phytates are anti-nutrients that bind and inhibit the absorption of iron. So things like green tea... a lot of other... Green tea's been shown to inhibit iron absorption by up to 20%.
Yeah, it's big.
I think China should be anemic.
Well,
You think,
a lot of people drink green tea if they've got an iron overload with their meals.
Yeah. So zinc sulfate green tea is a good way to slow iron absorption if you've got iron
I
excess.
think even any tea, like I think they usually suggest
The
with
tannins,
meals, drink tea.
Even black tea.
It's an
any of them
antioxidant
do it.
too.
Yeah. So these phytates and that sort of stuff. So they are basically anti-nutrient compounds found in cereals and grains and vegetables and a lot of herbs and that sort of stuff as well.
The leading
and a lot
source
of
of
the leafy
phosphorus.
sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the problem is they bind. So when we're using plant-based sources of iron, they've already got a factor there. Now, quickly, the phytase itself is typically made from our microbiome. So a good, healthy microbiome will make the enzyme necessary to break down the phytates in the plants to liberate the nutrients.
Oh, yep.
So, but what do you reckon of herbal iron tonics?
Well, can I give you I'll be a downer, I'm sorry, I have to say this, but a lot of them put it with vitamin C because they say, that'll convert it to the 2+. What they don't realise is once you donate an electron of vitamin C, it turns into the ascorbyl radical.
Yeah.
So you're purposely taking an ascorbyl radical, a free radical in your body,
right.
which is potentially dangerous, especially if you're doing it every day.
Yeah, wow.
And so a lot of people do take supplements for months. And so it's quite, you've got to be a little bit cautious of
Well,
that.
some people think even more. Some people go, man, I'm going to do a couple of grams of vitamin C 3 times a day so I get more iron out of my foods.
And
Does that work or no?
No. Once you turn it to the Fe2+,
Yeah.
and there's not that much iron
And
in
the
foods.
pH of ascorbic acid is actually going to dilute the acidity of the stomach.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near
It's only about
acid
4.
enough to have those other acid effects of the hydrochloric acid.
Remember,
Anyway.
it is technically an acid, but ascorbic acid. You know, ascorbic acid, the word comes from, don't you?
No.
Not non-scurvy.
Yeah, anti-scorbutic.
Yeah. So it is an acid, but it's not a very strong one. Considering pH of stomach acid is 1. The lower, the more acidic for the people out there. And ascorbic acid is about 4, and vinegar is about 3.
Yeah, right.
And then we also have to remember the B12, you know, so you're not going to get the B12 in plants either.
Yeah.
And B12 it's synergistic with iron. I mean, that's kind of like how you get the blood vessels at the exact right shape. Because if you're iron deficient, they're too small. If you're B12 deficient, they're too big.
Yeah,
And
wow.
either way, you can't transport
And then the
oxygen
two of them
effectively.
join together, make hemoglobin with
They
folate
make
anyway.
you know how you were talking about the mean corpuscular volume yesterday?
I was. Yes.
MCV.
Yeah,
That's a blood test measurement. As Elizma was saying, if it's too small or too big, that's either too low iron or too low B12.
Oh, were you talking about blood cells? I thought you were talking about the blood vessels.
No, the blood cells.
Oh, yeah. So
Did you want to talk about MCV?
Yeah, let's do it because on the blood test we talked about the storage forms of iron. Another thing to look at with your full blood count is actually the mean cell volume, the
very
MCV.
important marker.
So look for the MCV number, and if the number's really high, it shows that your red blood cells are big and old.
Yeah.
And so typically red blood cells live for about 3 weeks or so, and then 3 to 6 weeks, or then they get changed over. And if we're deficient in the nutrients needed to make new ones, they recycle the old ones. And then your average which is the mean. So your cell volume is basically getting larger and larger and larger because you're not making new ones. If you've lost a heap of blood and then you're making new ones, you get lots of little new cells. But they're kind of cool. They're fresh and new and excited to help in life. The old ones have lost their elasticity. They're shitty. And when you look at it under you look at them under the live blood, and you get. So quantitatively, you got a heap of blood, you're not anemic, you've got plenty of iron, folate and B12 when we mash all this shit up and test it and see what's in it. But if we actually put it under a microscope and see what it's doing, they're just these retarded blobs that can't actually go anywhere, and they're all stuck together. The moment you touch them, their integrity is so weak and they're so fragile, they just pop, they bust, they stick, they create those realios and that sort of stuff. You're not getting any oxygen out of that stuff. So it's not just a matter of looking at the properties and what has made up your blood, but also any way we can understand the quality of your blood and how well it's moving through your body. And that's why I love live blood analysis. That's also why we do these weird little things with the fingernails and the gums and look into the whites of your eyes and to see if we can see blood moving and what it's doing through the body. Yeah, I think that's cool.
It's
so,
important. And you got to
what did
remember
you call the word?
Which one?
The MCV?
Oh, mean corpuscular volume.
There you go.
Now, mean means average for the people out there. So they look at the average size of them. So
corpuscular is the red blood cell, and volume is size.
Correct.
I changed that corpuscular word. That's what I realised. There's years ago I changed that to
I think
cell.
cells.
Yeah,
right?
me too. That's what I just say. Mean cell.
So I just say mean cell.
No, you're
volume.
right. It is corpuscular.
Oh, yeah,
but I never remember that word.
No, me neither.
So I
right.
And sometimes you yell it out, it doesn't even, nothing even happens.
I know. Well, words are funny. It's funny, like when you pronounce iron. Do you know where the word iron comes from? Does anyone?
Iron.
Yeah, iron.
No,
iron.
No, which
because
word?
it actually could be more iron because it's an old Anglo-Saxon word, iron.
Yeah.
And it comes from when they used to make swords during the Crusades.
Yeah.
And it's actually a translation of holy sword.
Yeah, right.
And that's where iron comes from because it's made from iron.
It's a very large word to be translated. Tell me more about this. How the hell does the word iron mean holy sword?
I don't. It's abbreviation.
My holy sword is like iron.
Yeah, because that was one of the first things they made from iron. You know, weapons. It was a good idea back then.
It is. I mean, there's plenty of it around.
Post Bronze Age. Yeah, that's exactly. It was around the Crusades, so 8th century. You know, amazing. Amazing time,
Steve.
Dark Ages. Yeah.
Yeah, bloody hell. Lots of stories about the old holy swords from that era. Ask the Spartan next door.
Oh, yeah. Should ask the Spartan.
Now, Steve, you fucking dodgy bastard.
I think Brooklyn's going to cry before we...
Oh, whatever.
Oh, she's crying. We might have to take her.
Oh, we're going to talk about a dating life again.
Yeah.
No, that's funny.
Oh, gosh.
Now, I don't care what Brooko says because before the podcast, I tell you something really bloody funny because we were talking about Brooko's dating life for a second and I said, you know, that she could possibly lower her standards to better her average. And I thought that was a bit harsh from me, you know, say things like that because you should never settle. And I think that's wrong because Brooko is very special for anyone out there. You know, he's single and lonely and kind of below average. No. And then Drake, and then what's her name? Steve-O took it to the next level.
Yeah, I took it
and
to
he
the
listed the Drake, what is it called again?
Drake equation.
The Drake
It's a physics
equation, which is the equation to look for life on other planets. So I said lower your standards to better your average. Steve-O's looking for other worlds, life on other worlds,
Other
signs
life
of
forms.
water. That
Gotta
maybe there
spread
might be
your
a
wings
person
and,
that's stuck on another planet that might be desperate enough. You're an ass.
Little green men.
What were we talking about?
Well, we were
Iron.
talking about why heme-based iron is better than non-heme-based
That's right.
iron.
How the hell did we go to another
I have
planet
no
looking
idea.
for a date for Brooko?
But we'll get it back onto the
Okay, let's do
right
heme.
pathway.
So heme versus non-heme.
Yes.
So meaty iron.
meaty iron, yes.
What about it? That's the better one. So in supplement
That's the
forms,
better one.
what's the go when people... What's this organic versus inorganic iron? And one of them gives me a big black poo.
Well, I don't know which one is organic or non-organic. And Steve-O, you may know.
Do you want to join the chemistry? Yeah, organic.
for
The
it.
ferrous form is the absorbable form,
Yep.
the higher absorbable form, and the ferric one not
Ferric
so.
is 3+. Yeah.
Yeah.
So organic iron is iron that's bound to a carbon-based atom.
Okay.
Bound.
Yeah.
It wasn't a swear word, Brooke. You don't have to read pen it out. So it's bound to an
So sorry, start again. I forgot what word you said. So ferrous is bound to...
Organic iron is iron that's bound to a carbon-based atom. Like for example, like iron sulfate is non-organic. And that's a common one you get from the doctor, ferrous sulfurs. Ferrous is Latin for iron, if you want to know that.
So hang on, if it's in its ferrous form, so ferric forms 3+.
Yeah.
Ferrous is 2.
Well, ferrous is just Latin for iron.
Well, what I was wondering is if it's already in that form, do they need to add vitamin C to it?
No.
Because you only got to add vitamin C to the ferric forms.
Yeah.
Yes.
You only add it to the 3+ form.
Yeah, to get it to a 2+. Once it's a 2+, adding vitamin C to it
it does
is
nothing.
a token gesture, a marketing claim.
It's a marketing claim and probably a smart one because the public out there might go, something about vitamin C and iron, and it's in there.
Yeah,
also, if you take too much iron, it can be pro-oxidant. So vitamin C, antioxidant, protects a bit of excess iron. But you're right, you don't need it to absorb it.
Yeah, right.
So this is the interesting thing. So the organic iron is the one that's absorbed typically better, which is like iron diglycinate.
Why?
Because it's absorbed as a protein.
Oh, okay.
Which bypasses its iron, you've got little iron receptors, they're called heme receptors, and you can bypass them and absorb it as a protein, and about 98% of proteins are absorbed.
Yeah, right.
But only 10 to 35%
Is
of iron.
picolinic acid an important part of the iron absorption process? Picolinic acid in the pancreas?
So we make picolinic acid through the tryptophan pathway. And the way picolinic acid works is it's almost like a magnet. It kind of attracts minerals to the gut wall.
Yeah.
And then, they can kind of sort of like absorb through the gut wall.
So minerals in picolinate form, it's actually a pretty smart idea because we're actually just taking it to the step where it's in that form in the duodenum for absorption anyway.
Yeah, normally it's much higher, has much higher absorption, whether it's zinc or iron or whatever.
So it's not like anything abnormal and new or foreign to the body. This is actually the process that our body would use, utilising the pancreatic enzyme release to absorb nutrients through the duodenum and small intestine. So that's actually the normal process we go. So if you were to give someone a ferrous phosphate or sulfate or gluconate or something like that, and if it was to manage to get through all that point without binding to a zinc, without binding to a phytate, then it would be available to be picked up in a picolinate form and transported into the body.
Yep.
So a ferrous picolinate's not a bad one.
No.
Be better than a phosphate and a sulfate and less likely to constipate you.
Yeah, and bisglycinate as well. So bisglycinate doesn't cause the gastric issues that comes with the
really
sulfate forms.
Oh, that's cool.
But
so the
that means
iron, so the
too.
chelated iron.
Yeah.
So when it's chelated to 2 glycine molecules, and then that iron gets absorbed as a big large chunk.
Yeah.
And then it it's less likely to bind. So even in that form, we could probably have it alongside other things such as phytates, zinc, selenium, and that with less likely to be bound and clogged
that's
up.
what I said about half an hour. I said, there's a trick around the iron
so
absorption
a multivitamin and mineral that combines typically a bit of zinc, a bit of selenium. They'll put a token gesture of calcium in there and that sort of stuff.
Yes. So all these forms of iron. Now, it'll obviously speak to someone like Elizma about the form that's best for you because, you may need to supplement your iron. Of course, I'm all about food, of course, and everyone is here.
So you're saying away from meals, though?
Yes.
But what about acid? So we take it away from meals.
You've still got loads of acid to absorb.
You probably got more acid away from meals. So between meals, do we have just like this little pit of acid sitting there waiting?
Yeah, you always have acid in your stomach.
There you go. So away from meals, so we don't need to have it with meals because there's a school of thought that during meals is when all of our acid and enzymes are cranking. So we get better absorption with meals. No, that's not the case. So with iron, we want it away from food because our food will contain things like phytates, calcium, zincs, and all these things that may inhibit and absorb the iron.
And I want you to eat the red meats, the oysters, the livers, those sorts of things that are very high in iron too.
Yeah.
It's got to be the priority.
So what about the vegan guys then? What about the planty people?
Well, they'll have to
answer that one.
Well, they'll have to check their iron levels. I have to say I have had one vegan client, a long-term vegan client, who her iron levels always were great.
Yeah.
And I've
I had one my hardest hemochromatosis case ever.
Yeah.
Was this tiny lady, vegan lady. I'm through the roof, and no matter what, nothing would happen.
Now, I've got something interesting about hemochromatosis or iron absorption, because this could maybe give a bit of an answer. But they found there was a study done. I think this was in 1960s. It's an old one, where they found that low pancreatic enzymes increased iron absorption. So if you had high pancreatic enzymes, you absorbed less iron.
What?
You had low pancreatic enzymes, you would absorb more. So they...
What?
I have no idea. They just found it, and I thought that's very interesting. And they were looking at pancreatic enzymes as a reason for hemochromatosis, apart from obviously the genetic components and things like that.
Hepcidin and all that sort of thing. It's interesting because that's why one of the reasons why you take it away from food to avoid the enzymes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so if you took it on without food, you're not going to get the pancreatic enzymes, so you're going to absorb more iron.
Wild, man. So
if my wife's listening,
so iron should be away from food.
Yep.
Do not have it with either herbal supplements and herbal teas and your bloody mushrooms and your green teas and all that sort of stuff. The more herbs you're taking at the same time as your iron, the less likely you are to absorb it from everything that I've seen. We want to make sure you got plenty of acids. So maybe, is there anything that we can do to support that part? For example, I know that the vagus nerve is going to be responsible for a lot of that as well, and that absorption. So anything that hits that bitter taste buds of the tongue. So what about something like a Swedish bitters, Elizma? If you use like it's a herbal formula that's designed to stimulate stomach acid.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Well, I like any kind of bitters, right? So bitters could be apple cider vinegar, it could be lemon juice, it could be Swedish bitters.
I love gentian because gentian is a very low dose and bloody horrible.
It's like drops, you don't use that much. And I personally prefer using bitters more for digestion because it's not giving you enzymes, it's stimulating that
retraining it almost.
So it's stimulating the vagus nerve and all of that kind of activity that's involved in both stomach acid and bile production. So that's the way that I like to do it because it's more just regulating. That's how nature intended it. That's why there's always been bitter foods in traditional diets. It's just that we've gone too sweet.
And part of that culture and everything as well. You know?
So sauerkraut.
I mean, the body's, when you taste something bitter, it could be something toxic. So the body makes digestion to kill the toxin.
Kids dodge veggies.
Yeah.
And then you got to retrain them that it's not going to kill you. Just because you're intuitively, the bitterness is suggesting there might be a poison in
there. So the body,
which it is if you're a baddie.
Yeah, and if the digestive system ramps up, it can possibly kill the toxin. And that's the whole theory behind bitters.
So when you're looking for supplemental, so basically animals have got iron, liver's got a shitload of iron and all that sort of stuff. Eating those sort of things, we're going to get the right form of iron that our body can utilise and absorb. Take it away from your other foods, away from the phytates and minerals and everything else, so that way your body can just focus on bringing this in. So using those sort of foods as snacking or something like between meals might be the better way of doing it than trying to just jam up one meal a day to have a big piece of steak right next to all your vegetables. So then supplemental forms, you don't want to see anything that says ferric or something, you dodge. You look for ferrous. Then we want to look for the chelated forms. If you have to import a picolinate one, do it, whatever. So those sort of things, when we're looking at supplementation, the cofactors necessary for the ferrous would be more likely to be folate and B12 rather than vitamin C. Iron in a multi is sometimes just a token gesture and used to just maintain levels rather than being as a supplemental form to fix deficiencies because there's so many other little factors in there. So what about the plant guys? We're still stuck on the plants because as a naturopath, we're always told weird things too. Like people with anemia might crave ice or tomato.
Yes.
And ice is a definite thing, man. They crave those sort of weird, and tomato I don't understand. But interestingly, they said to use lots of things like beetroot and everything. And typically they'll say, they're red. Let's give them red things. And then I remember the spinach with the Popeye, there was a decimal point in the wrong place, so that was totally wrong. Did you hear that story?
I did not hear that story,
So the scientists that went and, I can't remember, do you know that? You probably know numbers.
I don't know the story.
Numbers? I don't know the story? Oh, fuck, I just remembered the story now.
I know Popeye, the sailor man.
Yeah, and you know how he eats spinach because it's good for it. So a scientist went and published a paper that basically said there's this much iron in spinach. I think it was the UK or so. So during one of the wars, They basically decided that they need people to have high iron, and there was rations, so they had the tins of spinach that they were trying to encourage people to maintain their iron through spinach. There was a decimal point. The scientist made a spelling mistake in the paper that he published where the decimal point was in the wrong place. They then, to this day, they still talk about how much iron is in spinach with the wrong decimal point. And the whole Popeye campaign came around about doing that, and all based on the fact of a paper that was published with the decimal point in the wrong place that made iron appear to be a hell of a lot higher in spinach than it actually was.
When
and then when the phytates and everything else, they found out that everyone eating spinach and the oxalates were getting no iron. And it was a really failed campaign, but Popeye survived.
Popeye survived. I like Popeye the Sailor Man.
The reason why I mention is I still, to this day, get a lot of plant-based diet people explaining to me that spinach is ideal because of Popeye.
Yeah, continuing kind of a myth.
Yeah, so come on, no one's offering any suggestions for the planty people, and there are lots of them.
You've got to measure, and if they are showing to be have iron issues, then I would just supplement. You've got to
just go get an iron supplement. Are there any plant foods that we could recommend as a good source of iron?
I can't think of
along
one,
with
but
vitamin C.
Beans are good. That's one thing I know of.
What
but
sort of
again,
beans? Like the green beans? Or the
navy
kidney
beans, those sorts of things, and kidney beans. But
how's your kidneys been?
Yes, but they're not going to be that great because they're bound with phytates.
Yeah.
So we're always going to struggle unless you can have it with fish.
And you said it would be in the ferric form, not the. It'll be in the 3+.
So it'll be in the ferric
So
form.
they need to do it with the vitamin C to help convert that, but then make sure there's none of the other stuff around. Really healthy microbiome is going to be the key. Really healthy microbiome to actually break down those anti-nutrients associated with all the plant material. And as far as we know at this point, further down in the digestive tract, they may make some miracle stuff that actually helps to shoot it in. Because we're finding that every day now from the microbiome. There's weird stuff made further down that has totally different effects we didn't expect.
Yeah.
So there may be something still to come out. But we couldn't really, as a supplemental group or something, sit down together and make a plant-based iron supplement as such. Like a lot of those liquid iron tonics and that sort of stuff. What do you think, guys?
It'd be interesting to try because it's a challenge.
It'd be a combination of, you'd have to do a lot with enzymes and have to do a lot of cofactors to break down the anti-nutrients. Hey?
Yeah.
So for anyone out there on a plant-based diet, if you are anemic and if you have the iron deficiency, a symptom picture here, first of all, try to increase the amount of iron-containing foods in your diet. Make sure you're not deficient in vitamin C and, scurvy and that sort of stuff. But otherwise, it's just, what do we do?
Well, you watch
healthy gut.
Yeah, healthy gut. And watch aspirin. Don't take little baby aspirin because that knocks out iron.
Yeah.
It can increase
little
bleeding.
Baby aspirin sounds kind of cute. Tell me more about
it's
that.
a little 81 milligram tablet of aspirin that
I
most
just pictured
people...
baby Groot. That's not cute.
That's there you go. And that knocks out iron. It also increases bleeding. It's good for hemochromatosis because it knocks out iron and stops clots.
Is that why they gave everyone that during the Spanish flu and killed them all?
They gave them 32 grams of aspirin during the Spanish flu.
No, I did not.
That killed them all.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
More people died from the aspirin recommendation than the Spanish flu.
Oh
the
my
average
gosh.
aspirin tablet is 325 milligrams, okay?
Yeah.
And you have to take 100 of those a day, and that was the Spanish flu dose.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now, baby aspirin's 81 milligrams. They gave them 32 grams, which is 32,000 milligrams. Yeah,
gosh.
Just have to make sure it's grams because it's a weird dose. It's a weird dose.
Yeah.
And also watch out for if you're on tablets like gentamicin for your skin.
Yeah.
That's an aminoglycoside, and that knocks out iron dramatically as well.
And then
Is that
proton
right?
pump
Yeah.
inhibitors.
So proton pump inhibitors.
PPIs.
What did you just say?
Well, gentamicin, which is a common antibiotic for your skin that a lot of people take, especially teenage girls for their skin.
Yep.
Also, any proton pump, but also histamine antagonists. Which are really for digestion.
Antihistamines?
Yeah, antihistamines, those sort of things. They knock out things too.
Yeah, right.
So you got to be, a lot of these common drugs.
So again, for the plant people, it's not so much that they need to add extra iron because we don't need to. You can get adequate amounts of iron availability in the plant material.
Yeah.
It's just trying to get the bloody stuff out of your guts and into your bloodstream in a form that your body can use.
That's the truth.
So it's not so much that they probably need to add. And same with their protein. Yeah, they don't need to go out of their way looking for protein. It's in their foods. It's just a matter of enhancing digestion, working with the microbiome to liberate those nutrients that you need out of those foods. So that's
It's
cool.
tricky, or supplement at the end of the day. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the end, because you know, you can supplement. Usually they come with B12, which
Yeah.
is a cool supplement for a vegan as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a double whammy. So
I want to do another podcast specifically on B12.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
that'll be.
I'm so
interesting.
confused about B12.
Oh,
It is a very confusing topic because it's like it's absorption and movement through the body. It's all like concentration gradients. It's like it moves in this weird way.
There's no active transporters as well.
Yeah, it's strange. It's like this weird diffusion going, but then also the part in the digestive tract that absorbs it is above the part of the digestive tract that makes it. It's so strange. Like more B12 is getting liberated in the end, but we absorb it up.
Yeah,
It's so
up higher.
strange.
Yeah.
So I want to do a podcast talking about B12 because
the
it's
different forms.
and then the different forms, and also we've been talking a lot about stability of B12 and the different forms and combining it with other things. And I always go back to the fact that food combines all these things no problem. And I keep going back, how the hell does it survive in a plant? But then when we try to formulate it, it destroys it. So it's fascinating. And B12 is a very interesting topic. I really want to do it because I get asked a lot of questions about it.
That'll be very
and the B12 injections and the sublinguals and the amount of people that going on B12 injections that have come out like, oh, now I have chronic fatigue syndrome for a couple of days or something. It's like full on. Anyway, let's do another one on B12.
Okay.
The iron one, I reckon we got covered. So now most people now should understand the symptom picture associated with lack of iron, the fact that it's a hell of a lot more than the blood, and by the time they come and say you don't have enough iron to make blood, there's all sorts of stuff that could be going wrong. How to absorb the iron, how to eat the iron. I think a lot of people will get a lot of answers to their questions here.
Do you want to know some useless information about iron?
I think we've
Yeah, I've
covered
got some
plenty.
useless
but
information
let's do some
too.
Do you want to do yours first?
Yeah.
All right, my useless information.
Just totally useless. But
yeah, completely useless, just fun facts.
Oh, I didn't prepare any fun facts. Come on. All right.
Well, men apparently have about 1,000 milligrams of iron stored in their body, which is enough to last them for 3 years.
Is that all? What'd you say?
Yeah, 1,000 milligrams, but it's
1 gram?
stored. Yeah, 1 gram, but apparently
A
they'll
quarter of a
last you.
teaspoon worth of iron
you
in our
only
whole
absorb
body.
1 milligram a day from
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So this will last you 3 years. Females, on the other hand, only have 300 milligrams stored in their body, which is enough for about 6 months.
Wusses.
Every time you donate blood, you lose about 200 to 250 milligrams of iron.
Oh, crap.
And with pregnancy, during pregnancy, and also delivering a baby and all of that, you lose about 740 milligrams of iron.
Jeez.
That's my
Holy
useless
truth.
information.
That's very...
That's actually useful information.
bloody cool.
God,
I
yeah,
forgot
my
all
useless,
of it.
my useless information. You know the Northern Lights. You've heard of those?
Yes.
That's due to iron.
Why?
Oh, wow.
Because the molten iron, okay, if you think of the northern hemisphere,
Yeah.
right at the North Pole,
Yeah.
that's where all the magnetic field comes out. Okay,
Yeah.
and if you see if the Earth is shaped like a ball, and the northern all the magnetic field comes like that, well, the sun comes around and protected, but it actually goes in at the northern there, where all the solar wind goes. It excites the ionosphere, which creates those lights.
Wow.
Yeah, you get the energy.
So it's very
which-
irony.
It is. It creates ions, and that's ironic because it energizes
bit.
the
That was a
electron to jump up, and then it comes down, releases a photon, which is light, and that's what we see. So that's useless information. Yours is
That's
useful.
very interesting, actually.
Oh, I got nothing. So mine's the useless information.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Popeye's story.
Yeah, Popeye's story is a good one too. I think that's useful.
Well, you demythed something.
Yeah.
I debunked the myth. Demyth, debunk.
Yeah, debunked him.
So...
Also,
got
the
nothing
red
else.
planet Mars is red because of the iron content.
Yeah, that is cool too.
Is it?
That
It
Okay.
is cool, man. I find that
'Cause they call it
so
the red
same
planet.
with red dirt in Australia.
Yeah.
It's full of iron.
Which is in Pilbara,
Yeah.
which is where they mine for the iron, for
And
the
uranium
iron.
and
Sorry.
everything else. Wow, way. And I walked in this morning and people said that I am lacking in iron because my shirt was all wrinkly. I had no idea what they were talking. It took a little while to kind of catch on what the hell they were talking about.
Jeez.
So, yeah.
This looks fine, mate.
All right. Well, any questions? Shoot them through, and we'll get Brooko to answer them.
Absolutely.
I reckon that was really cool. I reckon
Yeah.
because there's so many people that are going to get a lot out of this because everyone's curious about it. And it's very confusing, but
Yeah.
it's probably like apart from bloody vitamin C. Most people think, "Oh, I need an iron supplement or something," you know. So
Yeah.
this is excellent. Yeah, that'll do. Any questions? Shoot them through. How do you finish these fucking shows?
They go on, don't
That's
they?
us from us, and that's them from them.
Goodbye.
Okay, see you later.
looks like it.
She has, I think.
Yeah.
This is all getting edited over, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't want to defame someone.
I can't believe you're doing
you guys,
alcohol
you guys
syndrome.
Google it later. What?
Hey, oh shit! Let's not talk about that. Bloody edit any of that out. Holy hell! I was about to say, yeah, these new.
Yeah, okay, so you've taken the
fuck are we talking about?
You've taken the,
I reckon there's a whole section of this podcast we do not need. Typically where Brooko came in. So anyway,